The injured alien girl is sent to him for entertainment. But he risks everything to save her, regardless of fate. What if the love of your life didn't come from the person you've always known, but from the farthest reaches of the universe? What if the person meant to save you wasn't even human? And what if just maybe this love would either destroy you, or change the fate of the entire galaxy? You think love is something simple, something you can define, something that fits neatly into your world. But what if the world you know is a lie? What if love doesn't come from what you can see or touch, but from something that can only be felt deep in your soul, from the stars themselves? Kaden thought he was done with everything, done with the galaxy, done with the fight. But the universe has a funny way of inviting you into a story you don't want to be a part of. And what happens when love isn't a choice? When it chooses you? This isn't a love story between two people who understand each other. This is a story about survival, secrets, and a bond that goes beyond what either could have ever imagined. Can love survive the cosmos? Or is it the ultimate weapon, ready to destroy everything in its path? Stick around, because tonight's story isn't one you've heard before. It's a journey into the unknown, where every decision could be your last, and every word you hear could change everything. Do you dare to keep watching? Or will the secrets of the universe be too much to handle? The last word drifted silently through the endless expanse of space. Kaden sat in the cockpit, eyes fixed on the flashing lights of the control panel, but his mind was elsewhere. He'd grown used to the quiet, the isolation. His ship was his only companion. Then came the signal. A beep. A sharp, sudden sound that broke through the silence. Kaden frowned and leaned forward, his fingers dancing over the console. The radar blinked. A shape appeared. A pod. And it was coming straight for him. Kaden stood. What now? He muttered to himself. The pod had no identification signal, no transponder. It was just drifting, aimless. He activated the landing pad. The ship creaked as it adjusted. Kaden's hand tightened on the control. Was it a delivery? A distress call? He had no idea. The pod landed gently on the platform, its doors hissing open. From the shadows of the airlock, a figure emerged. She stepped out slowly, regal and otherworldly. Tall, with long platinum hair that shimmered as if it were woven from stardust. Her eyes violet glowed softly in the dim light. There was something powerful about her presence. Something that made Kaden's heart race. Her gaze met his, and for a moment, neither of them moved. Who are you? Kaden asked, his voice catching in his throat. I am Seren, she replied softly, her voice rich with authority and mystery. And I am in need of refuge. Kaden blinked. A refugee? From where? Why was she here, on his ship? His mind raced, but he couldn't speak. I don't understand, Kaden said after a moment, trying to steady his thoughts. She smiled faintly, but it wasn't a smile of kindness. It was something else. You don't have to. You'll learn soon enough. The words hung in the air between them. What do you mean? Kaden's voice was sharper now, his curiosity growing. I'm running from them, Seren said, her voice dropping lower. From the ones who created me. The Dominion. Kaden's eyes narrowed. He knew the name, of course. The Dominion controlled most of the galaxy. But this was different. He stepped forward. The Dominion. Seren nodded, her eyes never leaving his. They made me. but I am not theirs. Kaden stared at her, trying to comprehend. He had heard rumors, whispers about Dominion experiments. Soldiers. Weapons. But a person? A being like her? He took a breath, shaking his head. This is too much. I'm just a mechanic. I fix things. I don't do whatever this is. I don't need your help, Seren said, surprising him. I just need a way out. A way out. The words were heavy. They carried a weight Kaden wasn't ready for. You can't run forever, Kaden said softly, more to himself than to her. She tilted her head, considering his words. Maybe not. But I don't have to run alone. Her gaze softened, and for a moment, Kaden saw something flicker in her eyes. Hope. Or was it desperation? All right, Kaden finally said, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of thoughts in his head. What do you want me to do? Seren's smile returned, this time more genuine. Take me with you. Help me escape. The air inside the last word felt heavier now. Seren stood in front of Kaden, her presence almost too large for the small space. There was an air of command about her, but something else too, a quiet sadness. Kaden could see it now. It wasn't just her beauty, or the strange power that radiated from her. There was pain. She looked out of the window, toward the black void beyond. The stars stretched far and wide, but there was no peace in the sight. Only endless emptiness. Her fingers gripped the edge of the console, and Kaden could see the subtle tension in her muscles. She was lost in thought. Kaden had no idea what to say. What could he say? He wasn't prepared for this. For her. For the situation they were in. Where are we going? Seren's voice broke through his thoughts, pulling him back to the present. He swallowed hard. I don't know. But you're not staying here. Not on my ship. The words sounded final, but inside, Kaden wasn't sure. This wasn't part of his plan. But then again, his plan had always been to stay in one place, far from the chaos. And yet, now here she was, changing everything. Thank you, Seren said quietly, her eyes meeting his. There was a vulnerability there, a rawness he hadn't expected. She wasn't just a weapon, a cyborg. She was a person, with needs and fears, just like him. Kaden didn't respond. He didn't need to. It was clear now whatever was happening between them, it was bigger than just a stranger showing up on his ship. He turned back to the controls, flipping switches, trying to think of their next move. He needed a plan. But there was nothing in his mind. Only the sharp, pulsing sound of the engines and the distant hum of the systems working. Suddenly, an alarm went off. The screen flickered to life with a red warning. Shit, Kaden cursed under his breath. He had no idea what was happening. All he knew was that something was wrong. His fingers flew across the console, trying to get a read on the situation. It was a signal. A scan. And it was coming from Dominion. Dominion, he muttered, his voice dark. They've found us. Seren's eyes narrowed, her expression unreadable. I knew they would. But I didn't expect it to happen this fast. Kaden's mind raced. He didn't have time to think, only to react. He couldn't just let her get taken. Not again. He slammed a fist against the console. Damn it, I just fixed this thing. How the hell do they always know? Seren stepped forward, her voice calm despite the urgency. We need to move. Now. Kaden didn't hesitate. He grabbed the throttle and gunned the engines. The last word jerked forward, blasting through the void. The red warning still flashed on the screen, but they were faster. For now. As they blasted through space, Kaden couldn't help but feel a strange sense of urgency. It wasn't just because of the Dominion. It was because of Seren. He had to keep her safe. She was different. But more than that, he couldn't ignore the way her presence felt, like it was pulling at him, making him feel things he'd long buried. "Where are we going?" Seren asked again, her voice low and steady. "Away," Kaden replied, glancing at her. "We need to get as far from here as possible." But as he looked into her eyes, he realized it wasn't just about running. It wasn't just about escaping. This was something else. Kaden wasn't sure what was happening, but he knew one thing: this was no longer just his mission. It was theirs. The stars blurred past them like streaks of light, but the red warning still flashed in the cockpit. Kaden's grip on the controls tightened, his knuckles white. The last word was fast, but he knew it wouldn't be enough to outrun the Dominion forever. Behind them, the sensor readout was a constant reminder. The ship was on their tail. A Dominion patrol was closing in. "How much longer can we keep this up?" Seren asked, her voice calm but with a hint of concern. "Not long," Kaden replied, gritting his teeth. "They're too fast. We need to make a jump." She nodded, stepping closer to him. The proximity was electric. Every movement she made, every word she spoke, felt like a weight pressing down on him. He could feel her presence, her power, almost as if she was part of the ship itself. "Where do we go?" she asked. Kaden didn't answer right away. His mind raced. He didn't have a plan. He didn't have anywhere to hide, but he did have one trick up his sleeve. A secret place. A dead zone in the system. It was risky. But it was their best shot. "I've got a place," he said, pulling up the coordinates. "It's a junkyard off the grid. But it's our best chance." "Then take us there," Seren said, her voice sharp, commanding. There was no hesitation in her. She trusted him. And in that moment, Kaden realized he was starting to trust her, too. Kaden didn't waste another second. He slammed the engines into overdrive, sending the last word hurtling toward the unknown. Behind them, the Dominion ships were closing in, their pulses of energy lighting up the dark expanse of space. Kaden could hear the engines scream, the metal groan under the pressure. Seren stood at his side, silent but alert. The tension in the cockpit was palpable. Kaden could feel her eyes on him, watching his every move. There was something about the way she stood there, so poised, so focused, like she was always in control, even when the universe was collapsing around them. "Don't look back," Kaden said, keeping his eyes on the controls. "We have to focus." Seren didn't respond, but he could feel the change in the air between them. The space ahead of them was dark, a void between systems. Kaden's hand hovered over the jump controls. A split second before he activated it, the Dominion ships unleashed a blast of energy. The shock wave rocked the last word, sending the ship into a violent spin. Kaden cursed, slamming the control lever forward. The ship lurched, and with a sudden flash of light, they jumped into hyperspace. The stars around them warped, stretched, and finally, everything went dark. The last word drifted out of hyperspace with a shudder, the silence of the void surrounding them like a heavy blanket. Kaden's fingers were still gripping the controls, his eyes scanning the empty space ahead of them. There was no sign of pursuit. For now, they were safe. Seren stood silently beside him, her gaze fixed on the vast nothingness outside the window. Her face was unreadable, but Kaden could sense the tension in her body. She hadn't said much since the jump, and he knew she was likely lost in her thoughts. But what was she thinking? Kaden broke the silence. "We're safe for now. The Dominion shouldn't be able to track us here." Seren didn't answer right away. Her eyes lingered on the stars, her face drawn with a mixture of resolve and something deeper, something that looked like fear. "Safe, for now," she echoed softly. "I don't know how much longer that will last." Kaden turned to her, his voice softer now. "We'll keep moving. We'll figure it out." She finally looked at him, her gaze intense. "I've been running for too long. I've lost count of how many times I've heard those words. We'll figure it out. But I can't keep running, Kaden." The name left her lips like a promise, like she had made a decision, though Kaden wasn't sure what that decision was. He felt something tighten in his chest. "I didn't sign up for this either," he said, a rueful smile crossing his face. "But here we are." Seren's lips quirked slightly, but it wasn't a smile. It was something more, resigned. "Why did you help me?" she asked suddenly, her voice low. "Why didn't you just turn me in?" Kaden paused. He wasn't sure how to answer. The truth was, he didn't really know. It wasn't logical. But he knew that leaving her behind wasn't an option. "I don't know," he said honestly. "Maybe because I saw something in you. Something that wasn't just a weapon or a tool. You're not like them. And I guess I couldn't just leave you to the wolves." Seren regarded him for a moment, her eyes softening ever so slightly. She didn't say anything more, but for the first time, Kaden felt like they understood each other a little better. The ship coasted silently toward the edge of the junkyard. It was a desolate place hidden in a dead zone, far from any main trade routes. No one came here, except the occasional scavenger. Kaden had only been here once before, years ago, and it was still the only place he could think of where they might be safe, for a little while. Kaden checked the readout again. The junkyard was just ahead. "We're almost there," he said, eyes flicking to Seren. She hadn't moved from her spot by the window, still staring out at the nothingness, but her body was no longer as tense as before. She exhaled slowly. "This place. It feels like I've been here before," she said quietly. Kaden raised an eyebrow. "Really? I don't know. Maybe it's just the emptiness. It's all too familiar." Kaden frowned. There was something about her tone that made him uneasy. "I don't know about you, but I think I'm ready for some peace and quiet." She nodded, but there was a flicker of something else in her eyes, a memory, perhaps. Something that Kaden didn't understand. The last word touched down gently on the landing pad of the junkyard. Kaden powered down the systems and sat back in his seat. "This is it," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. The feeling of unease hadn't left him. Something about this place felt wrong. Seren stood up and turned to face him. "Thank you," she said, her voice softer now. "You didn't have to do this. But you did." Kaden looked at her, meeting her gaze for a moment. "It's not over yet. We've still got a long way to go." Seren's expression softened. "I know." She paused, then added, "But for now, this is enough." They both stood in silence for a moment, the weight of everything hanging in the air between them. The junkyard outside was quiet, still. But inside the last word, Kaden could feel something shifting. It wasn't just the tension from the chase anymore. There was a connection forming between them, something that neither of them could ignore. "Let's go," Kaden finally said, breaking the silence. "We need to make sure the ship's in good shape. We might be here longer than we think." Seren nodded. "Lead the way." They walked toward the hatch, but just before Kaden opened it, he turned to Seren one last time. "I don't know where this is going," he said, his voice low, "but I'm not leaving you. Not now." Seren studied him for a long moment before nodding slowly. "Good. Because I think we're both going to need each other." The sky outside the junkyard was beginning to darken, the stars creeping out one by one as the last rays of the sun disappeared behind distant rocks. The air was still, silent, as if the entire galaxy was holding its breath. Seren sat on the edge of a rusted metal crate, her eyes fixed on the horizon. Kaden could see the flickers of thought in her gaze, but he didn't press her. Not now. She had opened up to him more than he had expected, and he knew better than to push too hard. He was busy working on the last word, making sure the systems were running smoothly. But his mind wasn't on the ship. It was on her. Her presence had become an anchor, something Kaden hadn't realized he needed. He didn't understand why he was so drawn to her. It wasn't just her strength or beauty, but something deeper, a vulnerability, a piece of her past that she had never shared, one that she kept locked away. "Come on," Kaden said, snapping out of his own thoughts. He led the way to the makeshift workshop he had set up in the corner of the junkyard, hidden behind a pile of rusted debris. There was no real shelter here, just the bare essentials. It wasn't much, but it was all he had. Seren followed, her steps soft against the gravel, her eyes never leaving the horizon. Her expression was unreadable, but Kaden could tell she was thinking about something far beyond the present. It was as if she was searching for something, some piece of herself that had been lost. He reached the workbench and set down his tools. He was already running diagnostics on the ship, making sure everything was intact. But his mind wasn't on the ship. It was on her. "Seren," he began, his voice hesitant, "I know you've been through a lot. But I need to know, what are you really running from?" She stopped in her tracks, turning to face him. Her eyes were distant, almost hollow. For a moment, Kaden wasn't sure she would answer. But then, her lips parted, and the words came slowly, as though they had been buried for far too long. "I was a soldier," she said quietly. "Created for a purpose. A tool to be used. To fight, to kill, to follow orders without question." She paused, her gaze drifting away as though trying to pull the words back. But it wasn't always that way. Kaden watched her, his heart tightening. He had known she wasn't just a soldier. There was more to her, more that she hadn't shared. "What do you mean?" he asked, stepping closer. Seren hesitated before continuing. "There was a time, before all of this, when I was something else. Something more than just a weapon. But they took that away. They erased my memories. Reprogrammed me to be their perfect soldier." Kaden's chest tightened as he processed her words. Arinth Kai, he had heard whispers of it before, rumors about Dominion experiments, enhancements, soldiers bred to be more than human. But he hadn't realized just how deep it ran, how much she had suffered. "Seren, I don't know what to say," Kaden said, his voice thick with emotion. But you're not what they made you. You're so much more than that. She met his eyes, and for the first time, Kaden saw the person beneath the soldier. She wasn't just broken. She was whole. I don't know who I am anymore, Kaden, she whispered. I don't know how to live like this. Kaden stepped closer, placing a hand on her shoulder. We'll figure it out. Together. She looked up at him, her eyes searching his face. For a moment, everything else faded: the wreckage of the battle, the looming threat of the Dominion, the uncertainty of what was to come. All that mattered was here and now. You're right, she said finally, her voice soft. We'll figure it out. Together. The junkyard stretched out before them, a desolate, broken landscape of twisted metal and discarded machinery. The remnants of forgotten ships lay scattered across the barren ground, their hulls scarred and dented by the harshness of time. It was the perfect place to hide: no questions, no prying eyes. But even in the silence, Kaden could feel the weight of the world bearing down on him. He couldn't ignore the tension in his chest, the constant hum of uncertainty. It wasn't just the Dominion he was running from, it was something deeper. Something that had been buried in his past for too long. Seren stood silently beside him, her gaze fixed on the vast nothingness outside the window. Her face was unreadable, but Kaden could sense the way her jaw was clenched, the way her hands trembled ever so slightly. He knew she wasn't just physically drained, there was something deeper at work. Something he couldn't fully understand. Come on, Kaden said, snapping out of his own thoughts. He led the way to the makeshift workshop he had set up in the corner of the junkyard, hidden behind a pile of rusted debris. There was no real shelter here, just the bare essentials. It wasn't much, but it was all he had. Seren followed, her steps soft against the gravel, her eyes never leaving the horizon. Her expression was unreadable, but Kaden could tell she was thinking about something far beyond the present. It was as if she was searching for something, some piece of herself that had been lost. He reached the workbench and set down his tools. He was already running diagnostics on the ship, making sure everything was intact. But his mind wasn't on the ship. It was on her. Seren, he began again, his voice now soft, gentle. You said you wanted to find answers. What if they're not just out there? What if they're inside you? Her head jerked toward him, and for the first time, Kaden saw a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. Inside me, she asked, almost too quietly. Kaden nodded. Maybe what you're searching for is more than just a mission. Maybe it's a part of who you are, who you were before all this. Seren closed her eyes for a moment, a slight frown forming on her lips. I don't know if I can ever go back there. To who I was before. You don't have to go back, Seren, Kaden said, his voice warm. All you have to do is move forward. Let me help you. Seren met his eyes, her gaze intense but softer than before. I'm not sure I can trust anyone, but you. Kaden smiled, a slight laugh escaping him. That's more than enough for me. The two of them stood there, silently. The junkyard was quiet, too quiet, almost. The weight of their shared history felt heavy in the air, but there was something else there now, too. The weight of the future, of something still untold. Something yet to be written. The ship jolted as another round of fire from the Dominion ships hit its hull. Kaden could feel the vibration running through the control panel beneath his hands, but he didn't slow down. The last word was still holding together, but for how long? Behind them, the Dominion patrol was relentless, pushing forward with a precision that only military training could offer. Kaden cursed under his breath, weaving the ship through the asteroid field. But no matter how many times he tried to shake them off, they kept coming. "Can you give us more speed?" Kaden asked, glancing toward Seren. She was working furiously at the controls, her fingers dancing over the buttons, her expression locked in concentration. "I'm pushing it to the limit," she replied through gritted teeth. "We're not going to outrun them, Kaden. Not like this." Kaden's mind raced, the options flashing before him like a series of failed calculations. He could keep running. But that wouldn't be enough. They had to fight back. It was the only way to survive. "I've got an idea," Kaden said, his voice firm. "But we're going to need to use everything we've got." Seren turned her gaze to him. "What are you thinking?" "We make a stand," he said, his eyes narrowing. "We can't keep running. We'll take out the Dominion ships here and now." Seren looked at him, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then she nodded. "I'm with you." Kaden punched in the new coordinates, directing the ship toward an old Dominion station hidden in the asteroid field. It was a risky move. The station was practically a tomb now, abandoned for years. But it had one thing that could turn the tide: a weapons cache. They could use it to arm the last word. "Hold on," Kaden warned, his hands steady on the controls. "This is going to get rough." The ship blasted forward, making a sharp turn as they entered the station's gravitational field. The Dominion ships were still on their tail, firing relentlessly, but Kaden wasn't focused on that anymore. He was focused on the station, the only chance they had to fight back. "Prepare yourself," Kaden said, his voice calm but determined. "We're going to need to move fast." Seren nodded, activating the internal systems of the last word. She stood and moved to the rear of the ship, where the weapons lockers were located. "Let's make this count." The last word rocked violently as another blast hit the shields, but Kaden gritted his teeth and pushed the ship toward the station's entrance. The docking bay loomed ahead, dark and silent. But Kaden knew that behind the silence was a hidden arsenal of weapons that could turn this fight around. As they entered the station, the ship's sensors lit up with alerts. Dominion ships were closing in fast. There was no time to waste. "We have to be quick," Kaden shouted, rushing toward the rear of the ship. Seren was already there, pulling open the weapons locker. "Got it," she said, her voice steady as she grabbed the closest weapon, a high-powered plasma rifle. "Ready when you are." Kaden grabbed a second rifle, checking the power cells. "Let's make sure this counts." They moved swiftly, climbing out of the ship and into the abandoned station. The air inside was cold, stale, the remnants of a once bustling Dominion facility, now just a hollow, empty shell. Kaden could hear the faint hum of old machinery still running in the background, but there was no sign of life. "Keep your eyes open," he warned, scanning the dark corners of the station. "We don't know what's waiting for us." Seren's steps were silent as she moved beside him, her rifle aimed and ready. "I'm not worried about the station. It's the Dominion I'm worried about." Kaden couldn't argue with that. The Dominion ships were closing in, their targeting systems locked on their position. He could already feel the weight of the fight pressing down on him. There was no turning back. "Let's go," he said, leading the way toward the weapons storage bay. They had no choice but to arm themselves to the teeth. They reached the weapons vault and found what they needed: energy shields, plasma cannons, and explosives. The cache was far better equipped than Kaden had expected, and it was exactly what they needed. "We can do this," Seren said, her voice resolute as she checked the weapons. "We fight. We win." Kaden nodded, his jaw clenched. "We do this together." They rushed back to the last word, ready to take the fight to the Dominion. The Dominion patrol was right on their tail now, closing in faster than ever. Kaden jumped into the cockpit and slammed his hand down on the controls. The ship surged forward, engines roaring as they shot out of the station. The Dominion ships were already firing, their weapons lighting up the dark sky. But Kaden wasn't going to run anymore. This was it. They were going to fight. Seren stood at his side, her rifle ready. "They're not getting away with this," she said, her eyes fierce. "No, they're not," Kaden replied, his grip firm on the controls. "Let's end this." The last word turned sharply, heading straight for the lead Dominion ship. They fired. The explosion lit up the void, sending shock waves rippling through the space around them. It was just the beginning. Kaden and Seren fought together, side by side, taking down the Dominion ships one by one. Every blast, every shot was a step closer to victory. But even as they fought, Kaden couldn't shake the feeling that this battle was only the beginning. There was more to come. More to face. But for now, they were together. And that was enough. The debris of the Dominion ships floated in space, their once pristine hulls now nothing more than twisted fragments scattered across the void. The battle had been hard fought, but Kaden and Seren had emerged victorious at least for now. Kaden sat in the cockpit of the last word, his fingers still gripping the controls as his eyes scanned the wreckage around him. He could feel the adrenaline still pulsing through his veins, but it was quickly replaced by exhaustion. The fight had taken everything out of him. Beside him, Seren was quiet. Her gaze was fixed on the stars, but Kaden could see the way her jaw was clenched, the way her hands trembled ever so slightly. He knew she wasn't just physically drained, there was something deeper at work. Something he couldn't fully understand. "Are we really safe?" Seren's voice broke the silence, her words low, almost to herself. Kaden turned to her, his gaze softening. "For now. The Dominion isn't going to give up that easily, but we bought ourselves some time." Seren didn't respond, but the tension in her body didn't ease. She was still on edge, still waiting for something, waiting for the other shoe to drop. "Maybe we should go to one of the outposts," Kaden suggested, his voice quieter now. "Find a place to regroup." But Seren shook her head, a small but definite movement. "No. We can't keep running. We need answers. We need to know why they came after me." Kaden hesitated. She was right. They couldn't keep running forever. But the truth was, he didn't know where to start. He didn't know what answers she was looking for, or how to help her find them. "We'll find them," Kaden said after a beat, his voice steady. "I promise." Seren turned to face him, her eyes filled with something he couldn't quite place. "You keep saying that," she said, her voice tight, "but I don't know if I believe you anymore." The words hit Kaden like a punch to the gut. He had promised so much, and he wasn't sure he had kept any of those promises. He had saved her from the Dominion, but that was only the beginning. He didn't know what to do next. "I don't know what else to say, Seren," Kaden admitted, his voice raw. "I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm here. I'm not leaving." There was a long pause before Seren spoke again, her tone softer now. "I know. And that's why I need to do this. I need to know what happened to me." Kaden looked at her, unsure of what she meant. "What do you mean? What happened to you?" She took a deep breath before answering, her voice steady but filled with emotion. Before the Dominion turned me into what I am, I was someone else. I had a life. I had memories, dreams. I was human. Kaden's heart clenched at the way she said it, like the word human was something far away, something unattainable. He had always seen her as human, despite the implants, despite the modifications. But for her, it was a painful reminder of what had been taken from her. I was part of a project, Seren continued, her voice quieter now, a project called Kai. I was one of the first successful prototypes. They tried to make me into something more than human, more than anyone should be. Kaden's mind raced as he processed her words. Kai, he had heard whispers of it before, rumors about Dominion experiments, enhancements, soldiers bred to be more than human. But he hadn't realized just how deep it ran, how much she had suffered. Seren, I don't know what to say, Kaden said, his voice thick with emotion. But you're not what they made you. You're so much more than that. She met his eyes, and for the first time, Kaden saw the vulnerability she had been hiding. She wasn't just a soldier. She was a person, with dreams, with fears, with a past that had been erased. I don't know who I am anymore, Kaden, she whispered. I don't know how to move forward. Kaden stepped closer, his hand hovering over hers. He wasn't sure what he could say to make it better, but he knew one thing: he wasn't going to let her go through this alone. You don't have to know everything right now, he said softly. You don't have to have all the answers. We'll figure it out together. Seren looked at him, her eyes searching his face. For a moment, everything else faded: the wreckage of the battle, the looming threat of the Dominion, the uncertainty of what was to come. All that mattered was here and now. You're right, she said finally, her voice soft. We'll figure it out together. They stood there for a long moment, a quiet understanding passing between them. The stars outside continued to shine, indifferent to the storm that raged inside them both. But for a brief moment, Kaden felt like he wasn't just surviving anymore. He was living. And Seren, for the first time in a long while, felt like she wasn't alone. But the peace was fleeting. Just as they were about to leave the cockpit, a flash of light appeared on the scanner. Another Dominion ship, this time much larger, was approaching fast. They had been found again. Kaden's heart skipped a beat. Time's up. Seren's expression hardened, and she turned to face him. Let's finish this. The Dominion ship loomed on the scanner, its large silhouette dark against the stars, approaching with terrifying speed. Kaden's heart hammered in his chest as he activated the ship's defensive systems, his mind working on autopilot. But this time, the threat was different. They weren't dealing with a few scouts, they were dealing with a full-fledged battle cruiser, one that had enough firepower to obliterate them in seconds. Seren, get to the gunner's station. Kaden shouted, his voice urgent. He didn't wait to see if she heard him, already moving toward the control panel. There was no more time for strategy. They had to fight. Seren was already moving before he finished speaking, her body flowing into action. She didn't question his orders. She never did. The two of them, working in tandem, had become a machine of its own. Their rhythm was seamless, no words needed, just understanding. The last word shook as the first blast from the Dominion cruiser hit the shields. Kaden cursed and hit the throttle, jerking the ship to the side, narrowly avoiding a second round of fire. The ship's hull groaned under the stress, but it held together. For now. Seren's voice came through the comms, steady and focused. We need to disable their engines. I'm targeting the power core. Kaden's hands moved quickly over the controls, steering the ship into a spiraling dive. I'll keep them distracted. Hit them with everything you've got. They were outgunned, outnumbered. But Seren was different now. The woman who had once been a tool for the Dominion had become something more. She was their weapon, their strength. And Kaden wasn't about to let her go down without a fight. The cruiser fired again, a blast that shook the entire ship. Kaden gritted his teeth and pushed the ship forward, narrowly dodging the incoming fire. The ship was fast, but not fast enough to outrun the Dominion. They had to take the fight to them. Seren, are you ready? Kaden called out, the desperation in his voice clear. I'm always ready, she replied, her voice a calm contrast to the chaos around them. Kaden gripped the controls tighter, knowing that their next move would be the difference between life and death. They had one chance to make this work. Now, Seren. The ship jolted again, this time with the force of Seren's direct hit. A blast of bright light flared from the Dominion cruiser's engines, and the ship staggered, its speed dropping. We got their engines. Seren's voice rang out in triumph. But the victory was short-lived. Before Kaden could even exhale in relief, the Dominion ship launched a counter-attack. A volley of missiles shot toward them, streaking through the void like deadly comets. Brace for impact. Kaden shouted, yanking the controls to one side. The ship lurched violently as a missile struck the side. Sparks flew from the panels as alarms blared. Damn it! Kaden cursed, pulling the ship into a spin to evade the rest of the missiles. Seren was already at her station, working furiously. I can't hold them off much longer, she called out, her voice strained. We're losing power. Kaden didn't answer. His mind was racing, searching for a way out. He wasn't going to let Seren die. Not after everything they had been through. Then, the impossible happened. The Dominion cruiser transmitted a new message. It was a voice he recognized, a voice that sent a cold shiver down his spine. This is Commander Vax, Dominion High Command, the voice said, calm and cold. Surrender now, Kaden. You cannot win this battle. Your ship is already compromised. And if you don't surrender, I will be forced to take matters into my own hands. The message cut off, and the sound of it hung in the air like a dark cloud. Vax, the man Kaden had once worked for. The one who had trained him, who had once promised him that he would be rewarded for his loyalty. Vax knew him, knew his weaknesses. And worse, Vax knew about Seren. Kaden's blood ran cold. Vax, he muttered under his breath, his voice barely a whisper. Seren turned to him, sensing the shift in his mood. What is it, Kaden? Kaden's eyes were fixed on the screen, his fingers trembling as he gripped the controls. It's him. Vax, he's the one who sent you after me. Her expression hardened. What do you mean? Vax isn't just a commander, Kaden said, his voice full of disbelief. He was my mentor. I thought I knew him, but he's been playing us this whole time. He's been using you, Seren. You were never meant to escape. Seren's face paled as the realization hit her. She stood frozen for a moment, her mind trying to piece together the betrayal. But then, something shifted in her eyes, anger, cold and fiery, taking over. We can't let him get away with this, she said, her voice low and full of fury. Kaden nodded. No, we can't. But before they could react, the Dominion cruiser fired once more, this time with a direct hit. The last word shook violently as sparks flew from the ship's core. The shields were failing. The hull was weakening. They didn't have much time. "We have to act now," Kaden shouted, looking at Seren. "This is our last chance." Seren's face was set with determination. "Then let's finish this." They both knew it wasn't just a battle for survival anymore. It was personal. The last word shuddered under the continued assault. The ship's systems were failing, and every warning light flashed red, but Kaden didn't slow down. The cruiser was closing in. And behind them, the wreckage of the Dominion patrol lay like a distant memory. "We don't have much time, Kaden." Seren's voice was sharp, but there was no fear in it. Only determination. She had made her choice, and it was clear now. This fight was theirs, and they were going to win it no matter the cost. Kaden turned to her, his face hardening with resolve. The message from Vax still echoed in his mind, and he could hear his former mentor's voice in his head, calm, confident, manipulative. But that was before Kaden knew the truth. Before he knew that Seren was no longer his responsibility, but his partner. His equal. He couldn't let Vax win. He wouldn't. "Get ready," Kaden said, slamming the controls into overdrive. The last word lurched forward, rocketing toward the Dominion cruiser. "Where are we going?" Seren asked, not looking at him. Her fingers were already gripping the energy systems, ready for whatever was next. "We're going in close," Kaden replied. "We're going to make this personal." The Dominion ship fired again, and Kaden twisted the controls, making a sharp dive to the left. The shields flared and flickered but held barely. Kaden gritted his teeth as he maneuvered the ship into position. The cruiser was larger, more powerful, and now they were locked in a deadly game of cat and mouse. "Kaden, we can't keep dodging like this." Seren's voice came through again, and this time, there was a note of frustration in it. "We need to take them out." He looked at her, his eyes narrowing. "I know. I just need a little more time." But then it happened. The Dominion cruiser launched a full barrage of energy blasts, each one smashing into the last word with a deafening roar. The ship groaned as its hull warped under the pressure, alarms blaring across the cockpit. "We're not going to make it," Seren shouted, her voice rising in panic. "We will." Kaden snapped, his hands flying over the controls as he adjusted their angle. He was close now, close enough to see the Dominion cruiser's weak points, its power grid, exposed beneath the outer hull. "I need you to fire the main cannon, now," Kaden ordered. Seren hesitated for only a second before replying, "Ready." She activated the cannon, and a blinding bolt of energy shot from the last word, crashing into the Dominion ship's core. The cruiser's shields flickered for a moment, just long enough for the blast to penetrate. The Dominion ship staggered, its engines sputtering as the blast weakened its defenses. "Yes," Seren shouted. "We've got them." But Kaden wasn't done. "Not yet. We're not finished." "We finish Vax," Kaden said, his eyes hard. He turned the ship sharply and prepared for the final strike. Seren's hands moved like lightning, activating every last system of the last word. They had one shot left. The Dominion cruiser, crippled but still functional, turned toward them with a vengeance. It was clear now Vax wouldn't stop until they were destroyed. "Let's do this," Seren said, her voice steely. With a final, deafening roar, the last word barreled straight toward the Dominion cruiser. Kaden's heart was pounding, but there was no fear in him. This was the moment they had been fighting for. The two ships collided in a flash of light, the Dominion cruiser's hull breaking apart under the sheer force of the impact. Kaden's hands tightened on the controls as the shockwave rocked the last word, sending it spiraling through space. "Hold on!" Kaden yelled, his voice cutting through the chaos. The ship bucked violently, but Seren held steady. She fired another round into the cruiser's exposed core, sending a final pulse of energy that obliterated what was left of Vax's ship. For a long moment, nothing moved. The only sound was the low hum of the ship's engines, and the silence that followed was deafening. "We did it," Seren said, her voice a mixture of disbelief and triumph. "We actually did it." Kaden let out a slow breath, still gripping the controls. He didn't speak at first. He just looked at the wreckage of the Dominion ship, the final remnants of the battle. He was exhausted. He had been fighting for so long, but now, in the silence, something felt different. He turned to Seren, his eyes meeting hers. For the first time, he saw her fully. She wasn't just a soldier anymore. She wasn't just a tool to be used. She was someone who had been through hell, and still, she stood by his side. "I'm not running anymore," Kaden said, his voice low but filled with conviction. "I'm staying." Seren's expression softened. "Me neither." The last word floated in the silence of space, the stars above them a vast and endless sea. They were alone. Together. And for the first time, they knew they weren't running from the past anymore. They were free to write their own future. And as the last word drifted into the dark, cold void, something inside of me changed. It wasn't just the end of the battle, it was the end of everything I thought I knew. In the quiet, when the stars blinked coldly in the distance, Kaden looked at me, and for the first time, I didn't just see a man. I saw a future, and it terrified me. "What if it's already too late?" I whispered. But Kaden's reply was simple, almost too simple. "It's never too late." And in that moment, I realized, we were never just running from the Dominion. We were running from ourselves, from the love we couldn't understand, from the bond that was both our salvation and our destruction. But then the transmission came. The one we never expected. A voice, cold and calculated, shattered the silence. "The experiment has begun. You were never meant to survive. And now your love will be your downfall." In that moment, I understood. This wasn't just a story about love between two souls, it was the story of a galaxy that would do anything to stop us from succeeding. We've survived this far. But the real fight, the one that will decide whether love truly conquers all, or if it destroys everything we've ever fought for, is just beginning.